Well, a very good afternoon and a very warm stroke cold welcome to this industry panel. How animated are you about features? My name is Julian Scott. I'm the animation consultant at Film London. And if you don't know what Film London is and what we do, we are the screen agency, unsurprisingly, covering London. We connect ideas, talent, and finance, and we nurture and develop a diverse, pioneering creative culture, helping to deliver success in animation, film, television, games, and beyond. We're here to talk about animation and animated films. And before I introduce the panel and start the discussion, I thought it might be quite a nice idea to have a little look at what Film London is already doing in this arena. So if I can get the right button, which I think is that one, hopefully you'll be able to see and hear all this.
This is London. Mr. Gruber, it's wonderful.
Where do your amazing ideas come from? It's called Feeney.
My voice activated device.
So there we go, lots to be proud of, I think. Before I actually introduce the panel person by person, for a bit of fun, I'm going to tell you 4 things. Each of these things relates to just one of the panelists, and as an audience, your job is to decide which statement relates to which panelist, answers coming at the end. So, statement 1. I was in the army for a short while, and everyone used to joke that I must have been in the catering corps. Statement 2. When I was 3, my mother had a photograph of me taken with Margaret Thatcher, leading to the nickname Thatcher's Boy at school. Number 3. I have a degree in geography, but I started out as a trainee film editor. And the last one, I caught malaria in Thailand in 1984, swimming up a jungle river in the north of the country at night. Now, also bear in mind, none of the panelists know which statement relates to which. So, to the panel, I am incredibly lucky to have 4 very smart and experienced professionals with me today to talk about this. Firstly is Dulull. Has started his career in VFX before transitioning to directing and producing feature films that have aired on Netflix and Disney. He went on to found his production company HaZimation, along with co-founder Paula Crickard, and they produce animated feature films, series, and video games based on their property pipeline utilizing Unreal Engine. They've just recently completed the animated feature Rift, which is going to be released early next year. And right now they're in production on their next animated feature film, which is based on the game IP Mutant Year Zero. Simon Crowe. Simon is the founder of Velvet Octopus and was formerly head of sales of Icon Entertainment International and Capital Films. He's got a wealth of experience in international sales, production, and the distribution business. He formed SC Films back in 2008, and since then has been responsible for the international sales of commercial and art films. Most recently, Monkey King: Hero is Back, which was the #1 Chinese animation film of all time, grossing $155 million at the box office. The Reef animation franchise, Yellowbird from Team 2, and Gabba, I'm never going to say this right, Supos, is that right, Simon? The Secret of Moonacre, and he's currently chairman of Film Export UK. Robert Chandler, an award-winning writer, director, and producer with a very varied career spanning 3 decades in film, television, drama, documentary, live action, and of course animation. Alongside his success in created animated TV series, Robert's most recently been the creative producer on The Amazing Maurice, and recently completed work as producer and co-director of The Canterville Ghost. Both films were distributed theatrically around the world, Maurice being selected for the very prestigious Sundance Festival, and Canterville hitting the #1 spot on its release in the UK and Ireland. Lastly, but never least, Sean Feeney. Sean, with a 20-year career in animation and VFX, brings an incredible knowledge and extensive experience in this area. His credits include shows produced with Disney, Splash, M2 Lego, Mattel, Hasbro, and the BBC. He joined GFM Animation following 8 years at Prime Focus World, where he set up and developed their animation studio. GFM Animation, his role there is to develop and expand the slate of 3D CGI animated family movies, most recently 10 Lives, and he was executive producer on Paws of Fury. Now, if this doesn't feel too weird, please do give our esteemed panel a round of applause wherever you are.
Yeah, let's applaud each other. Yeah. We can't hear that other applause.
Waffled on for 5 or 6 minutes. To the questions here. Obviously, any animated film starts with an idea, a script, a concept. And Haz, if I could turn to you first, where do you source your ideas from? Where do they come?
And they come from all kinds of places. I mean, I could be in a shower and I get an idea based on a news report. I could be running. I mean, in terms of source material, I read a lot of comic books. You know, I grew up reading comic books, spend a lot of my time in Forbidden Planet, and there's always little nuggets of things in there, whether it's subjects or genres that inspires me. So I think, yeah, usually a lot of my ideas come from like a mishmash of things that I love watching growing up. Like, you know, the current movie that we've just finished that's coming out is, you know, referencing a lot of anime like Akira, Ghost in the Shell, but also love these kind of grounded science fiction films like Terminator 2 or even Alien to a point. So I think for me, a lot of it comes from like other material that I resonate with. But most importantly, you know, it's got to make me feel excited inside. I think that's a big thing for me. If I'm not excited by the idea or the subject matter of the film, then I don't know how I could get inspired to develop it further.
Fair comment, thank you. Simon, if I could turn to you and ask you the same question. I mean, you're at a slightly different end, being a sales agent and looking to distribute things internationally. Where do your ideas come from?
Well, I tend to work with creative producers. So my first point of call is normally with independent producers, you know, lots of ex-studio people. But I work with producers and I do a lot of reading and analysis, so that my idea is that they'll bring on a, you know, marketing distribution person like myself early on, so I can help guide them into the market. So the idea is I'm looking for very experienced producers with an idea that I think I can pitch and sell into the worldwide market. We talk about universal themes, for example, and you know, someone reliable and solid. So I'm looking for that producer that's got a piece of IP or a script or a pitch that I just think, actually, I think I can make this work. And so I'll go to all the markets and festivals in the hope of meeting these sort of like-minded people.
Brilliant, thank you. And Sean, with GFM, you're similar but different to Simon Crowe and SC Films. What if there's a writer out there, with an idea, or a writer who's got access to some IP? I think they call it legacy IP these days, something that's been around for a while. Is that the kind of thing that you're looking for?
I think, and not to go into too much depth, but obviously the selling a film today is very, very complicated because there are no residuals or back end to selling films. So you've only actually got the ticket price for most films if you go theatrical, or you got the fee, as it were, from a streamer. So it's very, very difficult. So we always look for ideas with, I wouldn't necessarily call it IP, but it's got to have a big hook. So Christmas could be a hook or IP, if you wish. Easter, Halloween. Look how many Halloween films there are every year. Dickens. Endless remakes of Dickens films. So for us, in a very commercial world, the most important thing for us is, what is the big hook? And if you're just writing another thing about fairies or furry animals or whatever, how do you make that stick up above all the other content that's out there? Because there's loads of that stuff. You've got to have a hook. And I think that's for us in the commercial space, that's the biggest challenge today. And I know it's tough on people, but original IP is really difficult, because to create original IP with a really, really big hook is a challenge, because everyone's been trying to do that for years. And I think that's why in our space, particularly, we are sort of migrating to, is there a book? Is there a TV series? Is there a very famous person or two very famous people attached? Some sort of hobby idea that they have. Is IP and hooks? That for us is the number one challenge, the number one thing we're looking for.
Well, thank you. And Robert, you were nodding very sagely there. As a writer, creator, producer yourself, does that resonate with you?
Yeah, it resonates, but it sort of highlights the constant wrestling match I have with myself and with the industry. The wrestling match to be commercial, but also in a perfect world, everything would be original in my head. Cinema is an art form that has its own merit. It doesn't need to adapt books. Books have already been written. Television works as television, radio works as radio. And so cinema should be proud enough to stand up on its own and be, this is cinema, this is an original idea. It kind of was back in the heyday. And we're sort of losing that a bit. That said, the last two animated films I've made are adaptations, because try getting something else away, as Sean says, we've got to be practical as well. So you try and just make sure it feels vital and alive, and most importantly, doesn't feel like an adaptation, but feels like a film in its own right. And that's me speaking as someone who's very passionate about cinema and wanting to always fly the flag for cinema as a vital art form.
I mean, just picking up on Robert's point there, there's nothing worse than reading a film script, which is just a book.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
No, indeed. I mean, I have to say, I've sort of got to point out that the film I made before those two was an original story that I wrote, and it was just such a proud moment. And that was a live action film, of course, a Christmas film. And since then, I've been inundated with people sending me Christmas films. But, it can be done. And an animation especially, which is such an imaginative medium, the only way to really do it is to get enough status and power, either as an individual or a studio. So either you're Guillermo del Toro or you're Pixar, and you have the power to be able to, in a way, you become the IP then, the brand that's being sold.
No, brilliant. And Sean was talking about finding that hook. Simon's mentioned it as well. And when we were chatting earlier on, you mentioned cast being very important. You think getting a big name attached to your.
It's so interesting, because I remember like 10 years ago when we were looking to animation, like And they're like, oh yeah, you know, cast doesn't play a big part of it because, like, you know, as long as you've got a really good concept and, you know, you have a really good producer on board, that producer's name usually carries. Whereas today, like, you know, you see the trailers at the end, there's like, boom, all these big names attached to it. You're like, oh my God, it's like almost going back to like live action when trying to get your project off the ground. So I think cast plays a big part these days, mainly because the audience now, you know, thanks to the pandemic, like, you know, animation got on a massive rise. You know, people like adults are now watching more animation. There's more adult type animation as well. And actors kind of want to diversify. They don't just want to be doing television, live action, features. They also want to dive into doing voice acting, motion capture, performance capture, and all of that stuff, because it's an extra, you know, thing to their career path or their art form as acting. So cast does play a big part. But like, you know, coming from my end, being independent, you know, where our budgets are kind of tiny, cast is a bit of an issue for us. We can't go too big of our names. So, you know, this is where something like IP, like games IP for us, is a big thing for us, because, you know, like, for example, like we're talking like, for us, the cast for the projects we work on are big names who are doing voices in games like Cyberpunk, who that made millions of dollars. You know, games like Last of Us, and having actors from there. So that then becomes our thing, and then that obviously dictates the market we go to as well. So when it comes to casting for our projects, we aim for like the video game rock stars, and then have one or two well-known feature film actors that we just get in for like 2 days if we can afford them. That kind of thing.
It's casting for, you know, for what, you know, your audience are, you know, if you've got a big video game celebrity, then that's going to help sell you.
100%. Yeah.
Sean, you were waiting.
I was going to say, the fascinating thing about cast is that for most of the world, they're going to dub it into a foreign language.
That's true. Yeah.
But coming back to Robert's frustration and, you know, the hooks, actually, if you have big English-speaking cast, it actually carries massively in selling your film internationally.
It does.
So cast is 2 or 3 names is really important. If you have any chance of getting into North America, cast becomes vital. And on our most recent film, we managed to get Mo Gilligan and Zayn Malik, and you know, because we wanted people who are diverse, we wanted people who are young, we wanted people with huge social media. Neither had done a voice before. Obviously, Zayn is from One Direction, and Mo Gilligan is the funniest man in the world, or so he's and he is very funny. And so cast is really crucial. If you again want to break out from the morass of all this stuff, these hooks again that elevate your content, hopefully.
Yeah. So Sean, you're absolutely right. I think for me, looking at all the projects we get sent hundreds and hundreds of scripts and projects, and I think the real thing is about what is A-list that makes this project different. Is it IP? Is it a game? Is it based off a book? Is it what differentiates it from any other piece of writing that we see all the time? And I think it needs an A-list element, whatever that is. And so it can be cast, and it can be an executive producer from Pixar, or it can be the game, etc. But it needs that element that we have, whether we haven't seen it before, or it's new, or just, you know, of the moment. It just needs something. You know, One Direction, obviously huge. That's a really good hook, and it's unusual. So it's a good place to start. Comedians can be really handy, obviously. But to stand out from the crowd, you've got to have that A-list piece to it.
Thank you. No,
can I just add to that, please, Julian? Because I'll keep it short, but I was sent a project recently, and I thought, oh, this is going to be really tough. I can see the beauty of it and the story. But then I found that an A-lister was attached to it to produce it and star in it, and I immediately changed. I said, "Oh wow, this is fantastic!" and it does change it. And you have to remind yourself that when you're watching a film at home, and you say to your family who are not nerds like you are, you say, "Let's watch this." The first question is always, "Who's in it?" It really is, and that applies to everybody, whether they're financiers, distributors, animators, and so having this A-lister on this particular project will make the difference. It really will, even though we could make the same film and it would be without him, let's say, selling it would be too tough, but with him it makes all the difference.
Well, I was going to ask you sort of a follow-up question to that, and just before I do, Robert, I just want to say to people out there in audience land, do feel free to put if you've got any questions as we're going along, do put them into the chat. We do see them, and we will try and answer as many as we can. But Robert, your most recent films have had stellar cast: Stephen Fry, Hugh Laurie. How do you go about attracting that kind of A-list talent to your film?
I mean, I do keep good relations with the agents. I do keep very good relations with the actors as well. I always look after them extremely well, because I'm very aware that although we may have them for, say, a 4-hour session or 2 4-hour sessions, they become our ambassadors for the film 2 years later when we're releasing it. Or if you're asking for an hour, please, for ADR because we need to pick something up, and don't you remember it's in the contract. So keeping relations is really important. Other than that, it's just respect the agents. If I don't know the agent or the actor, I will cold call and just say, look, here I am. This is what I've done. I think this would be a great opportunity. Will you have a look at it, please? And take it from there. I have to say another thing with Canterville, we had a brilliant cast. There were 10 names on that, and the US distributor reduced it to 5. He felt that there were too many, and so you also have to sort of cherry pick a little bit sometimes, and sometimes one good name. By good, you know what I mean. It can carry more than say 11. You can overstuff it sometimes.
Sure. Actually, there is a question that's just come on, which is a very neat segue into my next question, which is about sort of, financing and getting the money behind you. And Cathy Flores, I hope I pronounced that correctly, is asking, are we on a new gold era of animation because of the reach in terms of the streaming platforms? Or is this actually a negative thing that brings a lot of insecurity to the projects? I don't know who wants to go first on that one.
2 years ago, we would have said, yes, we're on the dawn of a golden era with the streaming money and the access. I think animation's one of those art forms that's constantly on the edge of being having a golden era. You just have to look for opportunities. It's easier now to make a film yourself and distribute it yourself. We never had that when I was 18. Good Lord, that was unthinkable. But now you can. Getting your work seen is much easier. So I think I can't think in those terms. For me, it's all about it's always a golden age. Just make it so.
Yeah. Sorry, go on, Simon.
I was just going to say, I mean, making a film is a huge achievement, however you do it and whatever budget level. 20 years ago, trying to make an animated film was almost impossible for an independent producer because it was all 16mm, 35mm. The costs were enormous. Technology has changed all that. And now, of course, we're all sitting on laptops here, which are incredibly powerful, and you can make a film. So the world has changed. What I would say to you, though, is it's still incredibly difficult to make a successful film, to get it into the marketplace, to get it distributed around the world. And that's why it goes back to the point we've just discussed about being A-list talent attached or something A-list. And then financing is always difficult. There's never unless you are Steven Spielberg, there's never an easy option of financing. And, we've all been doing this for 20, 30 years. Every film is a challenge. But with the right project, you create the finance plan, and then you hope you can get your film into production, and you talk to the streamers, which are incredibly reluctant at the moment to work with independents, unfortunately. Yeah. They're focused on the studios and other independents around the world. And that's exactly what happened with The Amazing Maurice, which was an incredible story. Hopefully Robert can say a little bit more about it later. But that's been a huge independent success. And I champion that. And that's what we try and do, basically. We can't compete with Pixar and Disney, but we can do the next best thing.
Yeah, and I was just going to say in support of that, then there was no golden era. There were eras. where things change. For example, if you look at the golden era, pre say 2008, when there were DVDs, you could make a film and it would always wash itself. You could go to Cannes, you could sell your film, no problems. But you couldn't make an animated film because they cost $200 million. So, yeah, so then, of course, DVDs and all the residuals went, and then it became much cheaper to make an animated film. But then the whole financial models changed. And then you've got the streamers who everyone thought was brilliant. But remember, they're only buying 2, 3, 4 films a year. So it's not as if suddenly the gates of heaven were open. And I think it's always been difficult. It's always been a challenge. Stick at it and look for the golden egg. Just keep going. I think that perseverance, I mean, everyone's mentioned how long these things take to make. It's perseverance, which is probably the most important thing.
And drive as well. Definitely. I mean, definitely drive. But like, speaking of financing, like, you know, there's so many ways of getting your film finance, right? There's always different places you get money. You know, there's government grants, then, which takes a long time to get, a lot of paperwork. And then there's private equity. And then there is like, you know, the distributor may put up a little bit of money. There's always so many different ways of getting money. Like for us, like what we found, because of technology, like you mentioned, Simon, like, you know, the technology's enabled us to get things done a bit quicker as well. Means that we're now, like back in the day doing a live action, you just cut together like a rhythmatic trailer or something, or show some concept art, and you put that as part of your finance package and your pitch, and you convince a financier to believe in this project. With animations, you know, back in the day, it's even more expensive. Whereas today, you know, with the power of CG, doing stuff on a laptop using, you know, things like Unreal or just in general, just so much quicker to get stuff done. You can do proof of concepts quicker. You know, if you look at the movie Deadpool, before that, I mean, that was a really good property, but even that took a while to get off the ground. And it was only until they supposedly leaked the footage, it got a massive, like, viral kind of like reaction. The studio's like, oh, okay, well, the fans want it. That's enough for us to greenlight. Whereas for us, what we end up doing is we end up making, like, financing ourselves the first 10 minutes, very rough, of what our movie was going to be. And then we went around and showed it to financiers. But instead of going to financiers, go, oh, here's a proof of concept. Here's a test. We still need to go to development. We're like, no, we're in production. Here's 10 minutes. Do you want to jump on this train or not? Psychologically, that kind of changes. Very ballsy, of course. I wouldn't tell everyone to do that. But my point I'm trying to make is the fact that because technology such as Unreal Engine, real-time technology, small teams, small amount of money was enable us to get into that process of making the first 10 minutes, to test it ourselves, to test it with potential distributors and financiers, that we were able to get equity financing way quicker than it would have been if we just had a bunch of storyboards and a script.
And I'm just going to jump in very...
Can I just really quickly, the only thing I'd say is, before any of you listen to this, go and spend any money. Make sure, like Haz, you have a good bit of IP or something behind you. Don't go out and spend all this money unless you know you have market tested whatever it is.
100%.
And you know there is an opportunity, even if you fail, there is a really good opportunity of selling it. So, yeah, just have a plan.
Have a plan.
Think first.
And I was just say something else about financing, but just as a producer myself from time to time, I have approached both Simon and Sean myself and said, look, here's my idea. This is where I am. What do you think? What do you think the next steps are? And I think to a certain extent, I'm not trying to put you guys on the spot too much. There are the opportunities to go to people who are, well vested and have great knowledge in the market and say, the price of a coffee, I hope. What he says, hoping that he can get his next pitch into one of you two guys for the price of a coffee. What should I be doing next with this? There are people out there who are prepared to read and talk to you for a little bit about it. The one thing, before we get back into the conversation, I did just want to drop in terms of, Haz was mentioning where there's all kinds of places to find money. The whole tax credit system in the UK is changing at the beginning of next year, almost entirely down to the hard work of Animation UK, for which I applaud them, and Kate O'Connor particularly. But one of the big changes in that, as well as we're going from the tax credit to the AVEC, and the gross rates are going up enormously to 39%. The big change in that is that animated features now qualify for animation tax credit, which they didn't before. So
Yeah.
that is another,
Yeah.
it'll net out to whatever it'll net out to, but it's going to be, between 25 and 30% of what you spend in the UK on your animated feature is going to come back to you. So, if you've already got nearly 30% of your budget there. So I just want to go back into the conversation. So, Robert, Has was mentioning about how long it takes to get films financed and get them together. The Canterville Ghost, I think, has a bit of a story behind it, doesn't it?
It does. We started that 13 years ago, and at a budget that was 5 times what we made it for. So part of yes, it's about tenacity, but it is also about, our original budget was $30 million. We were going to make it in Canada. We ended up making it for $6 million, mostly in India, but a bit in New Zealand and a bit in Ireland and a bit in the UK. And in a way, it's one of what I think Simon was saying about technology. Partly we were able to do that because the technology had changed, and it sort of becomes cheaper to make things look better. And you have to exploit that, because whether you like it or not, as soon as you put an animated film out into the cinemas, you are competing with Disney and Pixar. People are paying the same ticket price and expect a film of the same quality. Now, define quality. To me, quality is storytelling as well as the visual look, and I always try to bring something visually distinctive so that it doesn't look like a cheap Pixar film, but looks like its own thing. Sorry, that I'm going off on a tangent, but it's a little bit of a thing. But yes, Canterville, we went through a lot to get that financed. We were harmed by Brexit. We had money coming in from Europe at one point that collapsed. The studio with which we were doing the film in Canada collapsed, leaving us studio-less. And I know what you're saying, Has, but you're in a fortunate position because you might have either the financial resources or the studio resources to make that first 10 minutes. A lot of independent producers don't, right, unless they are studios trying to get work. And most studios are in a different situation because they're chasing service work, and they don't always make the leap successfully to creating their own films. So yes, Canterville, 12 years, The Amazing Morris with my partners Andrew Baker and Emily Christians, 3.5 to 4 years, and that was quick. That felt quick. You just chase money all the time. It's a sad fact of life. You have to go to where the money is, and that means you don't always end up making it in the UK. The change of tax credit will make a difference, because it means just when we put our finance plans together, we can show that we can, by spending more here, we can actually bring more money to the table. That's especially true because you end up doing a lot of co-productions, because it's quite hard to source one bit of money entirely from the UK. It doesn't really happen. You may be the exception here, but for a $10 to $15 million film, that's going to be pretty tough to get that in the UK. It won't happen. So you end up having to, Simon and Sean and I, we work with countries all around the world in order to piece together these mad jigsaw puzzles of finance. And with Canterville, 12 years, absolutely exhausted, and then you have to make the film and you're too tired.
I'd just like to support Robert there. If anyone is listening to this, 5-6 years, sometimes it's longer, sometimes it's a bit shorter. Maurice was quick. I think we'd all accept that. You got to go into this thinking, well, maybe makes me 3-4 years to finance it, then it takes me two years to make it.
Yep.
Then I've got the outside dates, and the broadcast dates might be another year on top. Yep. Until anyone sees it. So you've got to go in with the mindset, this is going to be a 5, 6, 7 year thing, and you've got to have good friends, and you have to work with people you can get on with for years.
You've got to have a lot of patience is one of the things I was thinking. I agree. When you have to collaborate. The only way to make independent films these days is really through co-productions. Yes. So it's never going to be just a UK production, and we can work with obviously every territory around the world. We have English speaking Canada and Australia, etc. But Europe is fantastic at co-productions, accessing funding. But at the end of the day, all of that is irrelevant unless you've got a really smart, interesting concept that you've made, and then you've got a team that you can rely on. A team, and every person in that team has got to be in the same position of working towards getting this film completed, because it's a complete challenge. And so your team of producer, writer, creatives, director, you've all got to be working together with your financiers, hopefully with your sales agents and distributors around the world, because it's a long process.
There's another question that's just popped in, which is something that's been on my mind. Leo Crane has just said how grateful he is for hearing from basically four men, which is a good point, and he's asking about the impression of diversity in the industry. I would just like to say that in terms of with no disrespect to the four very experienced gentlemen who are on your screen at the moment, I did ask. There are some very, very talented and successful female producers and sales agents. Unfortunately, the dates just didn't work for them. Otherwise,
you saw a lot of their work in your Film London thing.
Well, I did. Obviously,
that's
there's films. There's Locksmith. There's a lot of sort of gender diversity. And I don't know sort of how big the diversity question is from Leo, but he goes on to say or ask, do we feel there's an increasing or decreasing diversity amongst decision makers and gatekeepers, particularly for distribution and funding? So I'm going to throw that one first to Sean and Simon. I don't know which one of you want to pick up on that, but what are your feelings of diversity in terms of the gatekeepers and distribution and financing?
Well, when I first started, you're absolutely right. There was very little diversity, I have to say. But we have made huge strides in our industry over the last 15, 20 years. I would say from a sales and distribution point, there are more and more women coming into our industry completely. It's changed during my working experience. And the same with diversity. Again, it's changed hugely. And I think particularly the last 5 years, where we've become very, very aware of this situation. And I think the world is a completely different place than it was 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, maybe. Particularly in the UK, we are very much at the forefront of diversity issues. And we are definitely much better than other territories, but I think we are all aware of it, and we're all trying very hard to make it a more equal opportunity industry.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with that. I mean, in the film that we've just done, of the 8 lead cast, so the 8 named cast, 4 are people of colour, which is something we wanted to do, and we wanted them to be youthful and different from us. The CG studio we did that particular film was L'Atelier in Canada. Their entire lead production department, who controlled the film and the financing, were all women. We work with equity and financial partners. All their legal affairs are women. I don't know whether women like being lawyers. Women at work. We have 9 people in our office, and 3 of them are women, and 4 people are people of colour in our office. So I think, as Simon says, it's improved. It's changed in 20 years. I would say, I'm probably getting in trouble for this. In Europe, it seemed a lot less. We seemed in Europe come across a lot less diversity. And in North America, it's incredibly diverse. It's people there's such a melting pot. So I think big strides have been made.
Good. Haz, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you've all mentioned obviously executives and decision makers, but also, like, for me, the big push is getting female animators and female directors. You know, it's one of the big thing that we're pushing at the moment is that one of the reasons we set up in Belfast and to tap into like the universities and work closely to universities, because for us, it's all about the next generation of talent. And as we've all agreed here, it takes a long time to get a project off the ground. You know, we're talking years and years and years. So by that time, make those relationships with the universities, start tapping into the next generation of talent. And, you know, and it's got to be, you know, we're not interested in just hiring a female director because we just want to check that box of diversity. It's got to feel right. It's got to make sense. You know, you got to bring them in as early as possible in the creative process that they own that project, as opposed to bringing them on like when the project is set up. You're like, okay, we just need a female director to come in. Great, tick that box, because that just doesn't do anything for us. Same with people of color as well. You know, if the project calls for people of color, if it's about a subject matter of indigenous tribes or so on, or just any kind of culture, then fine, great. Yeah, that should be the storyteller. But for us, like you've mentioned, Sean, you know, the whole melting pot, London, UK in general, is a melting pot of cultures. I mean, where I live in Walthamstow, like we've got Polish, Ukrainians, we've got Chinese, Asian. I mean, it's amazing. You can even look at the streets of restaurants that already give you a reflection of the world that we live in today. So that should be reflective of the people working on the projects as well as being decision makers.
Agreed. I'll give another quick plug for another area of Film London, which is the Equal Access Network, which is run by a lady called Rebecca Baker. And that, I think when that was started, not by Rebecca, but by somebody else, it was, I think it had like sort of 500 people registered on it. I think it's something like 6,000 people in London now. And that area of Film London's work is specifically designed to allow access or help people who very diverse culture. Sometimes that's sort of, you know, gender, race. It's also sort of personal circumstance about neurodiversity and stuff. They work very closely with the group of people to run courses for people who would find it more of a challenge to find their way into our industry. I've spoken on one. There's lots of people who do. There are resources out there, you know, for people who are looking to break into an industry which they might find quite alien and something they know nothing about. So all I would say about that is look up Equal Access Network at Film London. But it's something that, yeah, as everybody has said, it is beginning to become more reflective of society as we move forward. So let's moving on. I mean, we've spoken a little bit about obviously where the ideas come from, what makes the ideas sell, how long it can take to finance some of the areas that we can get finance from. Obviously, we've just come out of quite a big change in everybody's life with the pandemic and COVID. Sean, I mean, what post pandemic? Do you think the market's changed? Do you think the industry's changed? The opportunities have changed?
I think going into COVID, the theatrical market was quite depressed because primarily, well, I've already mentioned the demise of the DVD. That was a big structural problem that impacted everyone. Then the streamers came along. And I think, as other people have mentioned, suddenly they were seen as this sort of golden cave that we could all clamber into and have loads and loads of cash. And that was also going to be the end of the theatrical world. And as we saw last year, suddenly the streamers hit the buffers, boom, which caused huge ripples. And at the same time, COVID obviously went away and people started coming back to the cinema. And I think what we see probably since mid to the latter part of last year is that in the family space, and I'm only talking family space here, the box office is back across Europe and North America. Maybe it's 90% in some places, maybe in Spain it's a bit lower. But in most countries, the family market is back. So if you're looking at kids between 5 and 9/12, the market has bounced back. And ironically, for us at least, in the theatrical space, the huge wobble in the streaming market has actually done us a great favor, because you can still sell a film theatrically, territory by territory, and that is a very stable marketplace. Whereas The streaming, the high-tech marketplace is doing this. So actually, I would say today, and as I'll be reminded, this will be completely different in 18 months. Today, the theatrical market, selling territory by territory because the box office is back, is much more stable than the streaming market, which for us in our particular area is fantastic.
Robert, you were waving your fingers around.
Yeah, I was going to sort of add to that, Sean, in that when Signature in the UK and Shout Factory in the US put out Canterville, because of digital distribution, because we ended up making the film for that family audience, it's no longer what it used to be. In other words, they in the UK they could release it at weekends only, matinees only, in the 12 weeks leading up to Halloween and then after. So they were really targeting the release date and how it was shown in the cinemas and which cinemas and what times. They knew there was no point in playing it on a Friday evening at 8 p.m. when everyone's trying to get into some other big movie. But with digital distribution and the flexibility of your distributor, you can, as Sean was saying, sort of mine this sort of return to the theatres, which we're seeing a little bit.
I mean, young kids have forgotten COVID. Granny and granddad, mum and dad, 2 weeks into the holiday, need to take their kids somewhere, and the cinema is a great place.
Yeah,
I think with our space, we're trying to produce independent animated feature films, and those have to target the cinema. So we have to come up with concepts and ideas that will take a family from sitting at home watching TV and watching Netflix and Amazon, etc., like we all do, or the BBC, etc. And we've got to get them to pay their tickets to go out and be entertained. And that is what we have to offer families. And that is the goal of all of us. You've got to entertain them. Then they go to the cinema. There might be, cinema clubs where they get cheaper tickets, etc. But you've got to get them off the sofa and entertain and make it a really fun 90 minutes plus trailers, plus popcorn, sweets, etc., etc. So what is it about your feature that has that ability? Because otherwise we won't end up making any films. They'll just go and watch the BBC or streamers, and there won't be jobs for us. So we've got to keep being creative and come up with some really smart, clever concepts that is just slightly different from what those bigger players are producing.
Sure. And I was just going to ask, you're just moving into self-distribution, is that right?
Yeah, but I mean, I just want to kind of follow up what Simon, Sean, and Robert were saying in terms of like theatrical. I mean, I'm all about the cinema, right? I'd rather go spend time in the cinema, turn my phone off, as opposed to on Netflix when you're on your phone. But here's the thing, like we're talking about kids animation here, right? So of course it's all about the family taking the kids out. But like if you're looking at young adult, right? Our animation between like 12 to 16 or 18 and plus, all the adult animation we've seen so far, majority of them have been given life on streaming, like Love, Death and Robots, or even the Adult Swim stuff. So that's a little bit tricky. I'm finding in terms of trying to get a young adult animated film shown theatrically and trying to get those numbers as opposed to kids, because like we all said, like moms and dads and families want to take the kids out away from home. So I think that it would be great if we were able to find a way of pushing young adult features to be in theatrical, and maybe that is that hook that you're talking about, Simon.
Yeah, I mean, I think the young adult, I mean, we've been talking really about family animation, haven't we?
Yeah.
Young adult animation is almost another industry completely.
It is, yeah.
Because, I've got, my kids are grown up, and as a teenager, they've got so many distractions. How do you get them away from their video games? How do you get them from, watching all the horror films or watching Marvel movies or playing sports, etc., etc.? They've got so many other distractions that to get them to the cinema to go and watch one of your animated films, I mean, it's got to almost be a piece of genius. I mean,
yes.
we went to see Spider-Verse. That was brilliant.
Yes.
But we're talking about a huge $100 million studio movie.
Big IP as well. Massive IP. Yeah.
So that's a whole different challenge, adult animation. And it is. you know, I think, and Sean, I'm sure you agree with me, we're all studying that at the moment because we see it as a growing market, but it's a tricky one.
Very
Yeah, it's worth looking at Crunchyroll and
Yeah.
the animation coming out there is huge, and the loyalty that those young people have, and by young people, it's quite a wide range, age range that watches Crunchyroll. I think it's brilliant, I have to say, and YA, I don't like the term, but no one does. You know, that's certainly something that I've been trying to do and get films made in that space for quite a long time. And the phenomenon of Crunchyroll has helped being able to ultimately, you know, your audience isn't just your viewers. Your first audience are your financiers and your distributors.
Yes.
You're aiming to please those people, and seeing the success of Crunchyroll, seeing the success of Korean animation and drama on Netflix is really helping.
Well, you know, Robert, there's an interesting thing there you brought up earlier, and maybe this is the thing. Maybe, as I said, everything will have changed in 18 months.
Yeah.
Maybe digital distribution to cinemas will actually be used as it could be.
Yeah.
That really flexible way, where, for example, one of your films could get a really short run in theaters instead of having to have a huge run,
right,
many weeks with P&A and all this baloney. Maybe in the modern world, if ever it arrives, you could just have a cinema where you get, you know, you pick your sessions very, very carefully. You only distribute in areas where there are loads of young people who want to watch this type of stuff. And maybe we end up with a much more flexible distribution network, which we don't have.
Yeah. This is one of the reasons why it's kind of funny what you was going to ask, Julian, about the self-distribution. This is why, you know, we've spent like just over a year like going to like EFM, AFM, and every sales market you can go to, because you kind of have to, you owe it to yourself as a producer, right, to do that. And you start to realize, oh, like, you know, the animation industry still is like, I'm going to get shot for saying this, there's still a level of snootiness, right? Like, you know, if it doesn't look like the content that they're selling, or the posters of the cute furry characters and they're shaded in a certain way, it's not considered as animation. Or they'll try and take it, like, look, with the caveat, we never sold anything like that, we'll take it, but we can't guarantee we're going to get into sales. And, you know, so with something like what we've done, where, you know, we are predominantly the main financiers on it, and we've had other equity financiers and partners and people like Epic on board, you know, we've had to rethink the way we distribute, and finding those partners is incredibly hard. It's not like they can't sell it, it's just because they haven't sold anything like that yet. And the only reference we could make, you know, for stuff like young adult CG sci-fi animation, stuff like Love, Death and Robots, but that's a whole different thing. That's a Netflix produced thing. You know, we're an independent. So we've decided to look at the self-distribution model, still partnering with like aggregators and specific companies that can get your stuff on certain platforms, because we can't do that. But we have a bit more control. But it also means we have a shit ton more work to do. In fact, just as much work as making the movie is selling that movie, right? and that is like,
thank you,
right? You don't realize it until you go into self-distribution. Like, oh my God, no wonder there's sales companies and people out there that do this for a living. But like, but for us, we still want to work with sales companies, but we're targeting specifically video gamers, because we know that there's a huge market there for that. We know that they've already been more receptive than the traditional animation audience with our content. So it really is dependent on your content. But I mean, self-distribution is very scary, of course, for the reason I've already said already. But at the same time, if you do have a plan and a strategy, and you've already seen some kind of metrics based on the results of your trailers and the PR you put out, then it's worth exploring.
Good, thank you, guys. With the sort of 9-10 minutes we've got left, I just wanted to ask you all another couple of questions. And if I can ask you this one, you know, has sort of, in a way, it sort of segues on from what Haz was just saying. Obviously, you've done all have done a lot of stuff, but you know, Robert, what the pitfalls, the lessons you've learned over the years, you know, what are they? What have you learned from all this?
Well, I used to run an animation studio, and that was hard work. That was like having to feed 40 to 100 people, hungry people every day, and that was quite tough. But I learned a lot from that. And when I set up as an independent, the main lesson really is obviously you can't do it on your own. So it's about choosing partners wisely. It's about finding the right people who have experience, but also are honest with you about every aspect. So I would say that's my main lesson, really. It's believe in yourself. It sounds a bit trite to say that, but it's easy to forget that if you are a creative, especially. But as Simon and Sean both applauded what Has says, everybody in the industry is working at their utmost, usually much harder than people realize, to get the films made on the screen, distributed, appreciated. Getting it on the screen isn't enough. You need a social media person working, months and getting all of the and so on. Everyone working hard together. What that really means, the main lesson is be diligent, choose partners wisely, work with people you're very happy to spend a long time with.
Same question for you. Pitfalls, lessons learned?
I think for me, like when I started off, I was a little bit naive. I'm like, I'm going to make the film that I love to see myself. Very Tarantino-esque, and that doesn't take you anywhere. Now, like, the next project we're doing, the pitfalls I've learned is test, constantly test the script, do as much table reads as possible, get actor friends to come in, test dialogue, test stuff, test with, when you're at a certain point, test animatics with potential sales company friends, distribution friends. You don't have to sign a deal with them or anything, but just get their feedback. That's the big thing I would learn, is get as much as early as possible.
Very good.
Simon?
Yeah, no, I think that last bit's really helpful, because too many people, and these are writers, directors, producers in particular that I speak to, don't have enough awareness of the market. And the worldwide distribution, and that's and so when someone speaks to me about their project, I want to know, are we going to get a deal? Obviously, the US is the biggest market in the world. China used to be the biggest market, the second biggest market. But am I going to get a deal in Korea, which is an important animation market? Russia, Poland, Japan, Latin America. So it's a collaboration. I completely agree with Robert. These things take a long time, so you've got to be persevere and keep going. But equally, try and talk to the market. Attend Cartoon Movie, attend Annecy, are the big 2 animation events. Go there and see what other people are doing. You may not want to copy them, of course, because you want to have your own voice, but learn from what they're doing and adapt your projects accordingly. Speak to people like Sean and myself, because you get a very brutal response. If we're interested, we will.
Been there, yeah.
If we're interested, we will follow up. If we're not interested, we say, send the script, we'll track it, or we'll talk to you about it. But, basically, we don't have time also to go through so many projects. So again, we can only focus on a handful of projects at the time. Yours has got to be the best. If yours is not the best 10 at the event, excluding the studio pictures, then you're going to be overlooked. It's got to be one of the best 2 or 3. We've just been at the American film market in Los Angeles, and there will be 10, 20, 30 new animation films pitched. If yours is not one of the best 5, you're not going to raise any money.
Yeah.
So why is it not one of the best 5? How do you make it one of the best 5?
Sure.
It's that.
Sean, same question to you. Lessons learned.
I've nothing to add. I think all my top lines, all my little notes I scribbled down have all been said. So I'm going to say something slightly different, which is, don't be dogmatic and be really flexible and take opportunities as they come along. So I think one of your questions was, how do you get into the business? Well, I started off as a runner in a TV commercials company in Soho that doesn't exist anymore. And then that took a sort of wobbly route, and I ended up, how do you end up working for a sales agent when in the UK there are 4? I've no idea what the pathway is. How do Haz or Robert get where they are. They probably don't really know either. So all I'd say to everyone is the biggest learning of all of this is, if you see opportunity, grab it, throw 150% at it, because even if that stepping stone isn't quite right, hopefully it will, through your energy and commitment, it will lead to the next stepping stone, which then gets you to somewhere different. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, see, that's kind of because there's Elisa Escorial, again, I hope I've said that right. I was just asking a question about, experience and knowledge, and being around the block a few times is essential. But, will there be more outsourcing to younger creatives? But maybe, Sean, you've answered that to a certain extent. It's taking the opportunities. It's, even if they don't seem particularly relevant at the time.
I mean, look, I don't mean this in a bad way. I'm not being youthist here, but for our sector at least, it's really, really commercial. And what we often find is that it's only when people get a bit older and a bit more reflective they're willing to step into the commercial space, because previous to that they want to do crazy stuff, which commercially doesn't work for us. But you work through it, you work through it, and then one day hopefully you'll end up in a brilliant place, aged.
I would say, as a producer, we're always looking for young creatives. But as Simon says, it is ruthless, because there's a lot of money at stake, a lot of time at stake. Setting up any film or TV series is a huge time suck. So you've got to invest in that, invest time. But if someone's good at drawing or shading or whatever their particular skill is, and they can show that they can apply that, please, every animation studio in the world, if you're that good, will want to look at your work. I really believe that. And it's easier than it's ever been to get your work out there. So no complaining, get on with it, show your best work. Do not put all the stuff up online that just show me your best 3 pieces, and I can see how good you are from those. But yeah, we're always looking.
Yeah, and constantly learn as well. Keep learning. That's a big thing I tell everyone, is always learn. You can never stop learning. Like when the pandemic hit, my live action projects put on stop, I learned Unreal Engine because I was doing previs, and that previs led to doing animated content, and then that now led to making video games. So if I didn't constantly keep learning, keeping my my eye on the market and seeing where it's going, I mean, being a creator isn't just about creating art these days. You got to kind of have a business mind a little bit if you want to make commercial art. That is, you want to get paid for your art. You got to keep your eye, like, have a business mind. When you're giving comps, like, what is this comp like? Don't reference an obscure movie no one's heard of. Reference a movie that people have heard of that's done really well. So there is a business case behind it if you want to continue getting paid for your art. That is.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, we've pretty much run out of time. So I just want to flip very quickly back to the 4 statements I read out at the beginning. And hopefully the audience have been thinking busily away about who these statements relate to. So I'll read out the first one again, and somebody has to own up to it. So, who was in the army for a short while, and everyone used to joke that they must have been in the catering corps? Yeah.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah, that's me.
Okay.
As I say, your career can take crazy paths.
Yeah, but you can still cook a sausage, though, can't you? Okay, next one. When I was 3, my mother had a photograph of me taken with Margaret Thatcher, leading to the nickname Thatcher's boy at school. Who owns up to that?
It's got to be Robert.
No way.
Exactly, because I knew you'd react like
Wow. Well, it's me, and I kind of regret saying this. This is recorded now, but yeah, that was me.
It's the age. It's your era, to be honest.
Exactly. There you go.
You're going to be on the chase soon, Simon. Okay. Next one. I have a degree in geography, but I started out as a trainee film editor.
Well, that's me, and and the reason why I say that is, again, that's Sean's comment. It's about it. It doesn't really matter what you do to start with. It's what you do at the end. And I started out studying geography. I really liked it. I was passionate about it. I still am, actually, but I luckily got a job as a runner in Soho. Started work as a trainee editor. realized that that wasn't exactly for me, that I preferred the business side, the marketing distribution side, and steered myself into that pathway, as it were. Anyway, that's me.
And Robert, you have to own up to the last one.
How are we going to guess? How are we going to guess?
Well, read it out, please, and then I can just embellish it a little bit.
Okay. I caught malaria in Thailand in 1984, swimming up a jungle river in the north of the country at night.
Yeah, that was me wanting to recreate Apocalypse Now. Couldn't get to, seriously, absolutely seriously, couldn't get to Vietnam. Thailand was open at that time, so I went there with my friend called Julian, another Julian, and there we were swimming up a river at night in the jungle right up north. If any of my children suggested doing something similar, I would restrain them. But you know, I did that. I'm so in love with cinema. I've always have been. And Apocalypse Now had such an impact on me. I just wanted to recreate Vietnam. Oh God. Yeah, well, and that's what movie making is, isn't it? Yeah.
They're swimming up rivers and getting malaria.
Cats in the jungle.
Listen, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to all four of you, Simon, Haz, Sean, and Robert, for taking time out, not only this Saturday lunchtime, but for the prep you've done and the conversations we've had leading up to it. And I know Simon is rushing off to a rugby match now. We have to ask you, Simon, who do you hope's going to win?
Bath, of course. Bath versus Exeter.
Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed for you. Once again, guys, and to Nag and Claude and everybody at the festival, thank you very, very much. And audience, I hope we delivered. Take care. Bye.
And thank you, Julian, for being a great host.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.